Picture this. You're sitting at your desk. You've been staring at the same task for the last 5 minutes, and you know you just need to power through and get it done. But the next item on your list is worse than the first. The monotony is causing a battle between your physical body and your mind on what you're going to do. Do you go for that third snack to eat in the last hour? Or you take out your phone and start that social media binge that your mind wants to do to avoid the task at hand? Do you find the boredom you're experiencing in your job frustrating? Do you have less and less vacation because you can't sit through another day of monotonous work? Or are the deadlines so far away that there's no motivation to power through? These are signs that you may be experiencing burnout. Hi, welcome to Rekindle XM, where we talk about stress, burnout, and effective ways to recover from the ashes of burnout and rekindle our fire. I'm your host, Brian, and with me today are Michelle and Masha. And during this episode, we'll talk about 6 ways to discover where your burnout is coming from, and also 6 tips to help you get out of your boredom if your boredom is outside of the workplace. So Masha and Michelle, is boredom a sign of burnout? Have you heard of this before?
I don't think this is something that, at least going back to when I was in a burned out state, I would not have recognized boredom as burnout. And I've supervised staff directly, and I've seen this where, they appear to be really bored, but it wasn't like I always went, oh, well, they're just not motivated, or maybe the job is boring to them. Maybe it's time for new challenges. Like, I don't think I would have associated boredom with burnout.
Likewise, I wouldn't associate boredom with burnout. I would associate boredom with laziness. Yet, I can totally see how it could be a symptom of burnout, thinking of a personal experience with having advanced degree and being stuck doing mundane secretarial work that just makes you go, really? I'm doing this work, which I could be doing something more challenging and meaningful to actually move the organization forward.
Hey, it all
I'm
pays
stuck
the
pushing
same.
paper. But come on, I mean, I'd like to use my
It's what my
mind when I
boss always
work.
told me. It pays the same. All right.
I can see it. Take the easy road and just do the mundane work. That's not who I am. I like to be challenged.
Yeah. Well, I can see it now because I think that it's easier to label something as, oh, I'm bored. And I think that maybe that's an easier label to give a task. It's boring rather than to label it something else. So I can see that, but yeah, I'm intrigued. So excited to discuss this.
Likewise.
Okay.
I want to know why there's some work I look at and I say, not today, and just keep pushing it forward. So what's behind it, Brian? Tell us the truth.
Meeting minutes. I hate meeting minutes. I will put those off all day long and the next day.
Yes. Okay. So there was an article that came out in 2012 in Education Weekly by Sarah Sparks, and it was a study that links students' boredom to stress. And she covers a variety of different areas where the boredom that they're seeing in students may be a sign of stress and not just, I don't, it's too easy for me. So one of them is the article discusses that any stress or distraction, such as emotional trauma or a negative emotional state, can make it hard to focus on the task at hand. And then the second one is taking on new and unknown tasks that seem difficult can result in people saying that you're bored instead of frustrated. So when you look at these two of these, and the third one was just saying, like, if somebody with attention deficit hyperactive disorder, they already have a hard time focusing, and trying to, depending on how you're trying to get them to work, that could be causing stress in their life as well. So when we look at those kind of 3 examples, How does this change your view on whether stress or boredom can lead to burnout?
The first one really resonates that
Mhm.
stress or distraction from emotional trauma or negative emotional state can make it hard to focus. I definitely had quite a bit layered there. And when doing those mundane tasks like meeting minutes, you have enough focus time where you'd have to do that annoying slow task, right? It has to be done and you still get paid the same, but your mind is so used to doing challenging things, so you kind of like fall back into that emotional trauma and distress and replaying those scenarios that you may have gone through that you haven't properly dealt with yet. And you definitely do take it to work, and I can see how it shows up as boredom, but there is an emotional underlying condition that you're still processing or refusing to process because you did not prioritize it as important to deal with just yet.
Yeah, I would say that that emotional trauma or a negative emotional state that also resonates with me. Um, During our journey to um, have children or adopt, there were some really stressful points. And I can say when you go into work and you're thinking about something that's very emotionally difficult, it just feels like the work no longer matters. And so you might describe it as boredom. But I can see that happening if you're going through any kind of difficult relationship at home or other emotional trauma, where it's almost like there's a filter on your in your brain that almost says the rest of this stuff just isn't interesting. It's not important right now because your brain is subconsciously perhaps trying to deal with that trauma and it doesn't have the energy to deal with the work ahead of you. I can resonate with that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and the article does talk about that. It says stress of any kind impacts the prefrontal cortex, so the area just behind your forehead. Um, this allows the amygdala, which is your emotional center, to take over, and it makes it harder to concentrate, and some can give the feeling of tiredness, anxiety, or depression. So it can bring you into the situation where Masha's talking about, where you start going back over all of the negative aspects of what's happened in your life because the task isn't it's too easy and you're just kind of going through the motions. But I think there also can be times where the task is really difficult and you're not sure how to start or where to go because it just seems too big. And I think we've all three experienced that in our rekindle journey trying to write this book and just other aspects as well, podcasting. There's been plenty of times where we've kind of delayed or pushed out or just acted like we weren't completely interested in doing this because we didn't know how to move forward with it. So, um, and it can appear like boredom, but it's really just kind of a frustration and a stress that we don't know how to deal with because the unknown is hard. But how this plays out in work, especially for me, when I started out, I was a computer aided drafter for um, bridge engineering. So I was detailing the bridges and the retaining walls and all of this stuff before I went back and got my engineering degree. And when within the first year, I pretty much done all of those tasks at least once, for sure by the second year. And there isn't a bridge out there that doesn't use similar details. So there's a lot of copy, edit, adjust, and paste to get your plan sets together. And this did not provide enough, I won't say entertainment, but it didn't provide enough challenge for me in what I was doing. So I was bored a lot. And the further along I went into this, the harder time I had doing the work. I would procrastinate and procrastinate and procrastinate farther. And you kind of get into a cycle where you start focusing on everything outside of what you're supposed to be doing. And then it makes it really hard to start moving forward in the tasks that you need to do. And this was happening to me. So there'd be extreme times of boredom but then a lot of anxiety because I let myself get behind and I had to really push to get done in time. So how has this played out for you guys as well? Now that you have a kind of a different perspective to look at.
Yeah, I can understand this aspect of boredom as well. And honestly, I think part of it, at least for me, I can see if I go back and look at some of the new challenges I've faced. Um, I don't know if I would have labeled it exactly as boredom, but the truth is, I would rather, if someone asked me, I would rather say, "Oh, well, this just seems boring," rather than admit, "Oh, this is challenging, and I don't know what to do." And I have a feeling that for many workers, if you want to do well, you want to excel in your job, your career, and you don't necessarily want to admit that this is too challenging, or on the other hand, this isn't challenging enough because of the perception of what is someone going to say. However, if you say, "Oh, well, this is just kind of boring for me," it's almost like you're saying, "Oh, well, I'm too smart for this," or I'm above this. And perhaps psychologically we're trying to tell ourselves that because we don't want to admit the truth.
It's right on
Well,
point. What comes to mind is, well, we are creatures of habit. We don't like to change. We don't like to grow. We keep going back to the same place, even if it's challenging, because we just not, motivated enough, or too tired, or too bored and too much going on. We're not making it a priority. We don't put ourselves first to grow, but we default to staying in the challenging mode because we know it. We we, we default to autopilot, right? Most of us do. Most of us are stuck in those positions that impede our growth and contribute to that boredom at work. But it's a mindset issue too. So how do we recognize that we are being fixed mindset versus we need to embrace the growth mindset and pivot out of that autopilot? It doesn't take much, but thinking about it is a lot more processing power than actually leaping into that change.
Okay, I got to jump in on that because you talked about mindset, and just finished reading the mindset book by Dr. Dwight. It's really it's really powerful when you read it. But one of the things you realize is that if you have more of a fixed mindset, so you think that you have a certain amount of intelligence, a certain amount of capability, whatever that is, if something comes up where you feel like you're not naturally good at it, you may tend to say, "Oh, it's boring. It's beneath me," because that fixed mindset has a hard time admitting that you may not be capable at this moment.
We have to start over on that train of thought, Michelle, because the mic broke down and I did not hear a thing. Oh,
Yep.
Michelle's offline.
Pause. Unfortunately, I got dropped. So I'm struggling to, we may have some issues with this episode. All right, redo. So I think what you talked about with a fixed mindset is really interesting because a fixed mindset will shy away from tasks. They'll say, "Oh, that's boring. I don't need to try that," because they're afraid they won't succeed. And I've done this too, where it's like, "Oh, no, that's not like that's beneath me. I don't need to do that." Okay, meeting minutes were kind of that way for me because the reason why meeting minutes were so challenging, one, it's kind of a mundane task, but two, because you and I, we worked on these together a lot of times, and it would always mean that we had another set of tasks to do because the action items on that, that came out of those meeting minutes were usually ours.
okay, but I think
That
you
is so
guys are
true.
taking this to an extreme on one side.
Mm.
Um, I don't think boredom is just a sign of a fixed mindset because there are definitely situations where you can't get out of the task at hand, regardless of what you do and how you change your mind. So there's just some jobs that if you stay in that job and you don't inherently enjoy what you're doing there, it's going to be monotonous and it's going to be hard to do. And you can try to change your mindset and reappropriate how you're looking at the task. And I think we do those are probably one of the fixes that we can look at later. But it's not always that simple where we just, well, not that changing your mindset is simple anyway, but it's not just that simple where you can just flip the switch and say, hey, I'm going to change my mindset and do this, because
I will change.
by the
I will
time you realize,
challenge that. But not yet. When we talk about it, I will challenge that point. I have really precise examples of when that's possible and it does happen. But it is that switch.
But I'm also going to
You have
jump in
to
here
find
and
it.
say there is a
well, you
point,
guys
and this
didn't
is
even let
probably
me.
yeah, I know we're just jumping all over you. Okay, Brian, finish, and then I have a thought.
Well, I've lost that thought because you just jumped in on top of her jumping in.
Okay, so I'll jump back in then. So I do agree with you, Brian. Sometimes there are monotonous tasks at work, and there's really nothing you can do about it. But I will say this is a personality thing. Sometimes
Okay,
you can change your mindset.
but you guys are
but
also looking at this as a professional, college educated, working in a white collar job situation. I've worked in, before I went to college, I've had to work in factory plants where I did RF welding for medical bags. There's no getting out of that task. There's no changing that task. It is what it is. You can find ways to make it entertaining. They generally put you next to somebody else, so you at least had somebody to talk to while you're doing that task. But there's just situations that's not going to change. So then you have to decide some other things. And before you guys try to jump in on me again, I'm going to go into my 6 questions to ask yourself if you are bored at work and it is stressing you out. So number 1, you have to start thinking about, is the current job that I'm working providing the challenge I need to stay focused on the task at hand? Or do I like what I'm doing? And if you like what you're doing and it's not challenging enough, then you have to start asking, well, is my boss open to me coming to them saying, I need a more challenging situation? I can't always be doing this task. Is there other ways that I can participate in this job and have new experiences? What are your guys' opinions?
All right. So I'm going to give you a blue collar example. Okay. So
Okay.
Undercover Boss. Undercover Boss is one of those interesting shows. I love to hop in, and CEO of a waste management company went undercover and went with his employee washing and cleaning out porter potties, right? To see like the health of the company and the morale. And of course, there's tons of examples where employees got fired on the spot for having that negative mindset and being bored at work and talking down on the company and the work they have to do. But this particular employee was cleaning those babies out, was having a jolly old time. He was talking to those porter potty toilets like it was a hot mama. And he had a blast cleaning those things out. And this CEO was just like, who are you? How are you making this job fun? Like, he was so impressed. That man was promoted to a manager, and that man climbed up the ranks. It wasn't the job that shined him away. It was his mindset and about making the worst job the best job, because you spend more time at work than you do at home with your loved ones. So if you can't make your job fun, you could. It's a switch. I
Okay,
couldn't do it.
I'm
yes,
not saying you can't.
it
And no, I did say that there are ways. I'm not disagreeing with you. And in fact, what I said earlier said the exact same thing, kind of. And to be honest with you, there was one time there was a guy and I that saying, I'm Henry the Eighth I am, like 99 times, trying to entertain ourselves. Everybody in that place was wanting to strangle us because we were singing it not quite at the top of our lungs, but it sure wasn't quiet. And that is the most
so
annoying song in the world, other than bird, bird, bird's a word, or some of those other ones that keep saying the same words.
And Brian, you
Anyway,
actually
go
have a
ahead,
really
Michelle.
nice singing voice, so at least you were doing it on tune. But I think,
Maybe.
okay, I'm going to disagree a little bit on both sides. So can you change your mindset? Yes. And I go back to, okay, Mary Poppins, which I'm really familiar with in my generation, but that spoonful of sugar. So a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. So yes, the right mindset can absolutely contribute to job satisfaction regardless of where you are. But I also think this is a self-awareness question. Ask yourself the question, and what's your immediate answer? Because you have other options in most cases. So I do think it's still important to ask yourself the question before you get to the solution part.
Yes, you have to identify
agree.
the problem before you can deal with it. That's correct.
Okay, so question 2. Is the real problem that I don't like the job overall versus just a dislike for some job tasks? What areas am I interested in? What steps do I need to take to allow me to walk away from my current job and make a transition to another career that will give me the sense of purpose and fulfillment I need? I kind of feel like that's too many questions for this. But anyway, what are your guys' thoughts?
Okay, so we're both looking at each other. Are you going to jump in? I do think this is an important question because no matter what job you have, there are going to be some tasks you don't like. And I think any of us who've been on the job for any number of years recognize this. So that's really important to recognize if it's the overall job that where you feel bored, unchallenged, or maybe you are burned out, versus identifying the tasks that you don't like. So Masha and I've already talked about one. I really don't like meeting minutes. I really don't like admin. My last job began to switch more and more from what I did enjoy to admin. And that was the point at which I was like, oh, okay, it's just time to leave. I am burned out in this current job because I'm doing too many tasks that I don't like and not enough that I do.
I think that's a
Exactly.
good point.
I've experienced the same exact thing. Used to love, love, love what I did. It was challenging, it was stimulating, it was high responsibility, high visibility. We had a voice, we were helpful, we worked with all kinds of stakeholders to make it interesting. We met so many different needs and it was empowering. But then when to mitigate the risk, right? The jobs were split multiple ways and it became more of a pushers to do those administrative annoying tasks that anybody else could have been doing. And the job became less interesting and less challenging. But here's the thing, even though you were removed from that role and transitioned into a new one, all of the people already know what you do, right? To them, the change didn't happen. So you're stuck doing more work because you never really transitioned out of it. There's nobody else who can answer those questions efficiently, effectively, in a timely manner. You can just do it. So then the scope creep begins. You can't say no to those people. And then you still have to
Why
do
not?
those mundane tasks that you keep pushing on.
I can say no. I learned that one fairly quickly in engineering.
Yes, he can. I'm well familiar with that.
For teaching it to us, Brian. I say no all the time now. It drives my kid nuts.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, a really important question is to, in your mind, have a list of here's what I like about my job. Here are the tasks that I consider boring, and being able to look at those two lists and decide, which one is weighing the other one. I stayed at the same organization for 25 years. I moved positions, I don't even know how many times within the organization, in order to keep the balance of the things I liked, weighing more than the things I didn't like, until the very end when I was like, okay, it's just time to leave.
Yes. And if the audience would like some steps on how to help them walk away from a job or career that they don't like, be sure to watch our Golden Handcuffs episode. Shameless plug.
Also interested in our audience feedback and comments. What are you seeing and experiencing out there? Has this struck any ideas that had the aha moment? So please put your comments below. It does inspire and motivate us to keep talking about things that could be impacting your burnout and unrecognized burnout and mindset.
All right. Question 3. Is there an event happening in my life that is taking all of my brain's processing power? And if there is there a solution to this that can regulate my mind and body so that I can focus on what I'm doing? So I think we
yes.
run into that a lot, where there's like I just broke up with my girlfriend and I can't think about anything else right now. But what do I need to do to be able to focus on my task at hand so I'm not ticking off my boss and I'm getting the work done when I need to? So those are the type of questions that question 3 is asking.
That one is
Mm.
really dear and near to my heart, especially at the moment. My grandmother experienced a life-changing event for all of us, and now has an escalated level of care, which we all are dealing with. And it was a very difficult week. It happened literally overnight. Everything changed 100%, and we're still dealing with this change. And on Friday, I shared some of that with my coworkers, and I told them I just need to do a half day today because I don't have the mental capacity to do anything with the quality that I like to do things with. Well, actually, it turned out to be a full day because I did find that one task that took my mind off my problems outside of work. And I actually wanted to engage in a task to help and clear that mind. But it was a very particular task. It wasn't other things that would have taken away the brain power. It was something that it made me feel good to complete.
That's an interesting strategy, Masha, because if you are in a position in a job where you have some autonomy about, how you use your time and when and how you get your task done, that is actually a great way to be able to still work even in the midst of emotionally difficult times. And I've used the same strategy because I've had a lot of autonomy over the last few years. And there are some days when it's like, no, I am not doing any task that is draining or that requires, too much brain power. Instead, I'm going to focus on a task that I actually enjoy that won't drain me even further because I know I'm dealing with these emotions. Today's a rough day. I mean, we do the same thing when we're not physically feeling well, right? When you feel drained, if you have that ability to choose a task that you can enjoy, then that's actually a great way to combat that. Great strategy.
And that's helpful if you have that flexibility, like you said,
Right.
Michelle. I can't tell you how many times I've gone when I was an entrepreneur in my prior life before the healthcare world. I used to go to many businesses, and there's one particular business. It was a telecom company. So you can tell that it's monotonous work. You have to do the same thing every single day, every time, which is twice a week. I pulled up to that facility. There was somebody outside of the front crying every time. They couldn't leave and they had a break and they were just bawling their eyes out. I'm like, what a miserable place to work. I definitely don't want to be here. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, it's not necessarily work and feeling miserable. It's other emotional things that will get you to that state where you just have to let it out and you have no other outlet. You don't have sick days, you don't have PTO. What do? You go in a parking lot and you cry.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I mean, these situations are also where you start using your supportive coping mechanism. Like in the times that I had an event that was affecting me, I would, even in the times where I have trouble focusing, I know now that if I put headphones in and I listen to the station that I always listen to, I can start tuning out everything else because the music has become my background noise and I can start focusing. So it's not just, there's multiple ways to regulate your mind, and you just have to start learning what your supportive method is on that. So
That's a
number
great call out. Okay, hold on. That's a great call out. You called out music, and a number of people use this strategy at work, but depending on the type of music, that can really help get you through. So that's a good strategy as well.
Do us all a favor. If you do use music as a coping strategy, keep it in your ears. Because I was in workplaces where they were trying to play it nicely and humbly at their desks, but it was not the type of music I enjoyed and it ruined my day. So please be mindful of that.
All right, don't stress other
I have
people
to
out.
put that
Um,
disclosure. I'm sorry. It just had to happen.
number number 4, has there been a traumatic experience in your life that you haven't fully acknowledged? What are the steps that you can take to start healing from this event? Should you seek professional help to move past this event? So this is this can be very difficult to be focused at work in a traumatic event. Michelle can probably give some insight into this, as well as Masha, with the things that have been happening to them recently. So I'll let them both take this one.
Yeah, I guess, I'll start. So we had, one of my family members was extremely ill, and in fact passed away recently. And you can't just push that out of your mind entirely. So you have to give yourself some time and ability to heal. There are people who that something traumatic happens in their life. They lose a loved one. They go through a traumatic divorce, whatever it is, and they immediately try to jump back into work and use that, just staying busy, as a way to cope with it. I think perhaps most of us have tried this at some point, but it's going to catch up with you one way or another. And again, it's almost like that filter that comes over your brain where, why am I doing this? That the emotions are pushing their way up, and kind of crying to be dealt with. Sorry, guys. I know if there's guys listening, they're probably like, whatever. But until you deal with those, you just can't focus, and it may come across as boredom.
I don't even know where to start. And contrary, Michelle, I have become an expert of shutting that area down. Press the button, it's gone. It comes up, press the button again, and it's gone again. Just sweep it under the rug and, never deal with it. Why is it important to deal with emotions and process trauma in an important way, right? I did not value that, and that was due to my background and upbringing. Emotions are signs of weakness. And if you feel something, you get punished. That's what some of us teach our children, is not to healthily process emotions, but you get punished for having emotions and having feelings. I was one of those childhoods for me, and I had to learn it as an adult. And I can tell you, it's a skill that you can learn, but you have to recognize and deal with past trauma. And you have to use specific coping methods that work for you. I chose to go through therapy because I'm really quick to just get through issues and think I'm done, but I didn't fully deal with them. And having that accountability partner was the key, because I could not get down to the deepest level of why, or why did this happen? And when I started uncovering the layers of that emotional trauma, the earliest trauma that I could recall was from the age of 2. It was a very specific nightmare that was following me through my adolescent life. And then when I started going through other emotional traumas as an adult, that nightmare came back. And I was baffled. I'm like, that is my childhood nightmare. And it's not all that scary. It's just the feeling that was associated with it. It was masked. So that image, right, in your dream was replaced in emotion. I could not get past that on my own, and with therapy we did. And I was just, no way. I was 2 years old when this happened, and I remembered. And once I remembered, I was able to, with her help, put it where it needs to be and heal from that emotion and let it go. And it's amazing how much weight comes off instantly. So it's worth the time investment, it's worth the money investment. It will make you a bigger, stronger person and more mature way to deal with life, because life is not easy. Things come and go, and we need to have the good tools and good support systems to be able to overcome those.
Yeah, that's a good call out, Masha. And not just with the traumatic experience, but the last two questions. Um, we are not medical or professional therapists. We do not try to solve your issues. We're just trying to bring them to light. And with the final questions, including this one, if you are at a point where you're struggling enough and you don't know how to get past it, we highly encourage you to seek professional help.
There's one quote that resonates with me, and it's actually, I learned it in healthcare. If you don't make time for wellness, illness will make time for you. And after I've learned it, I was like, wow, that's powerful. Did I do anything about it? No, I knew about it, but I did not change my way. Well, illness happened. It made time against my will, and it did happen. And now I think I'm like, I had all the warning signs and I blew right past them. So that's why it's important to recognize and deal with things. You have a choice to make time for them, or the time will be made for you, and you will lose heck of a lot more than just time and money.
Good point, Masha, because you said you were the expert at pushing down past trauma, but eventually it caught up to you. Brian and I have gone through many rounds of foster care classes because we were thinking about the foster adoption process, and this is talked about a number of times of children who come into the foster care system obviously have trauma, and it's going to come out. Just expect it. It doesn't, it may not happen at a certain age, but eventually that trauma is going to come out and it's going to have to be dealt with. And thanks, Masha, and Brian for putting in a plug that there are times when it is just your best, wisest course to seek help.
And yes, and with the foster care system, they were telling us that even like trauma as a baby, infant, will still come out later on in life. And the child isn't even aware of it, but it's there. And so trauma comes out regardless if you don't face it. Number 5, are you feeling an unusually high amount of anxiety? If you're feeling high levels of anxiety to the point where you can't remediate it, again, please seek help. And anxiety can happen in a few different ways. I mean, in a couple of weeks, we'll be airing an episode with Stephen A. Hart where he felt a panic attack. And that's a high level of anxiety that's happening at that time. What are some other examples of high anxiety, or what are your guys' thoughts about that?
We're talking about this because the word anxiety is a label on a term, but how does it feel, right? Well, it may be that you're just scatter-minded and you just can't focus, right? It can be that buzzing feeling that it feels like you're over caffeinated and you're just buzzing. And it could be an excuse, oh, I just had too much coffee. Well, that's also a symptom of anxiety. And paceness of heart, shortness of breath, it can actually mimic like you're having a heart attack, and that's like a panic attack, is what Brian has mentioned. So there are physical feelings that you may be experiencing and not taking seriously. Michelle, what are your experiences with anxiety?
I feel I have a different physical response. So my physical response is definitely in my stomach and just having that feeling of nausea or stomach clenching or that feeling of like heartburn. That's my indicator that I'm experiencing anxiety. It can also feel like you have so many tasks and so many different responsibilities going through your head that you just feel like you're going to be pulled in 1,000 pieces, which again makes it really hard to focus because your brain is seeing all of the responsibilities, all of the tasks that need to be completed, and then you're looking down at your desk at this particular task, and it's just like I can't actually physically focus my brain because there's 1,000 other things running through my brain. So that would be my experience of anxiety.
Another experience of anxiety is avoiding, evading, and fleeing from situations, or avoiding to face it. When I was going through a divorce, it was a really difficult divorce, really emotional divorce, and I had to face in person, and I knew that's where a lot of hardships came. That's where a lot of bullets flew, and I did not want to face that. And what happened was I would have physical symptoms like you mentioned, the feelings in your gut, the feelings in my chest, the symptoms in my mind. I was pacing. I was not going in. So I had to default to medication to tame the anxiety to be able to do the basic tasks associated with that particular season. But it's not a fun place to be, and it's okay to seek help. And help oftentimes can be short term, but it's necessary to get through that season. to get it under control, and then wean yourself off of those aids if you are using them.
Okay, number 6 kind of can go hand in hand with anxiety, and it's, are you feeling depressed? So a lot of people will say that depressed is looking backwards and anxiety is looking forward. So if you're looking forward and it's causing you stress, then that's anxiety. If you're constantly revisiting what's happened in the past, that's a sign of depression. And if you're getting to a point where the depression is just continuing down to where you're having trouble wanting to do anything, and I don't want to go too far into this because I'm definitely not an expert on telling you how to what your signs of depression are. But if Masha or Michelle have anything they want to add to this, then please do.
Definitely seasons of depression, and I've experienced a lot of situational depression, especially in those very challenging seasons, and that came through sleepiness and just getting the rest and giving yourself those excuses not to do the things that you need to get to. And there are other multiple examples of depression. Um, when I started seeing my therapist and we did the questionnaire, and of course it amplified the situation. She's like, "Whoa, you need help." I'm like, "Yeah, I need help." And then she's like, "Well, do you feel like you're depressed?" My answer was, "Well, I feel like depression is something that I have a choice to fall into or not. And if I have certain feelings, I can do things and proactive things to snap myself out of it." So, like, you have a choice until you don't have a choice, right? You have that moment where you can recognize and pivot and be like, nope, I'm not going to go there. Nope, I'm going to get there. But once I started dealing recently with my situation with my grandmother, I have had significant symptoms, and I recognized them, and I was like, oh, that's depression. I can't go there. But it stuck around for a while, and I could not snap out of it. So there are feelings that you can deal with and pivot. Depression tends to stick around, and still dealing with some of those things because now we have to adopt to a new life. And of course, having the feelings of guilt and shame and things like you can do more, but you can't, and you're out of control, and it puts you in that space, right? Situational depression, it comes and goes. So those are signs that we need help. Whatever those coping strategies are, it will reflect in your life where you go to other places, where you go to work, where you go socialize with people that you love and enjoy. But the main thing is for me is to open up and talk about it. Once I talk about it, you share with somebody once, you have half the burden. You share it again, it's half that burden. You share that as much as you can until it's completely gone. So I've definitely shared my story with so many, and those feelings of affirmations, like, yep, you're doing everything you can. And sometimes that's all we need in those situations we can control, is affirmations from others that you are doing everything and beyond that you possibly can. And that is okay that we've reached this point. We knew this point was coming, and it's time to accept and let go. So a lot of things you can do, lots of things that you may need help with, and it's okay to ask for help.
I think one of the challenges, though, is recognizing, it's really interesting to me that this article asked these questions about anxiety and depression in reference to boredom.
They didn't ask these. These are my questions.
Okay. So I think this goes back to correctly identifying what we're feeling, because especially, let's say you haven't had a major life event. Let's say that your depression is actually coming from the work that you're doing, your mindsets around work. It's related to your profession and your job. Identifying this could be a real challenge because you're trying to point to something and say, oh, well, that's what's depressing me. But in this type of a situation where maybe it is the work you're doing, it could be your mindset, there's a lot that goes into that. But correctly identifying depression or anxiety versus boredom is a really important point. And it's just interesting to me that these feelings, we misdiagnose ourselves, and this is part of the reason why we need to see professionals, because we can misdiagnose ourselves. We can say, I'm feeling bored, and what we really mean, if we knew, was, no, I'm feeling depressed. So I think that this goes back to
Well, let me.
self-awareness and getting help, because I don't know that I would have associated, oh, I'm bored with, oh, I'm depressed.
Okay. I came up with these questions, but they were talked about in the article as far as anxiety and depression adding stress and making you think that you're bored. So you are correct there. But moving on to sometimes boredom isn't in the workplace. What you're doing at work is providing enough challenge for you that you're not bored, but you're finding that you have chronic boredom outside of work where you're not like a really strong introvert who has allowed themselves to be so introverted that they sit at home with nothing to do and they just have a struggle, getting past that. There's an article from withtherapy.com by Heather Lyons, a PhD, and she wrote the article called How Boredom is Bad for Your Mental Health. And she talks about how chronic boredom can increase your risk factors for mental health. And these can include anxiety disorder, ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenia, PTSD, and depression is part of that as well. And so that's kind of where these questions came from, is reading these two articles. They both talk about anxiety and depression. So these are things that can definitely be mislabeled, as you said, with boredom, and people just aren't realizing what's going on there. But so if you're experiencing that boredom outside of the workplace and you're not sure how to move past it and you want to change that mindset, she does go into 6 different ideas that boredom can increase your mental health. And I'm going to read the 6 out right now. So the first one is volunteering at a local organization. The second one is spending time outdoors, biking, hiking, or going on walks, Michelle's favorite thing. The third one is teaching yourself a new skill, like learning a new language. Michelle wanted to get into wood carving and I wanted wood carving. She wanted wood production. She wanted to make tables and stuff. She's weird. Anyway, the fourth one is reading a book or listening to a podcast. 5 is joining a meetup group to connect with new people, which is going to be really hard for the really introverted people. 6 is finding new ways to express yourself through writing or painting. So those are just 6 ideas that can help you get out of your boredom in an outside of work situation. They're not going to really help you in work because that's taking away time from your employer. What are some other ideas to help get past this chronic boredom that may be happening outside of work and causing you stress that's leading to burnout?
Simple one is finding a friend. If it's not
Phone
a
a friend?
social group, finding a friend. One thing I've implemented with my girls is we have a girl night once a month. Is it realistic? No, not for all of our schedules. We make it every month and a half. Like we're going on 2, but it's happening next week, whether we want it or not. Like it's mandated. It's happening. It's in the calendar. We're only allowed to reschedule twice. If that's and when it does fail, we connect on the phone. Like have a small and humble group where you do share. It's hard to share because we oftentimes feel like we're alone and nobody can relate to us. I was at a Bible study group with a new group, completely new group, just my dear friend in Texas. She was hosting a women's group on one of the Saturdays I was there, and I happened to be blessed enough to be a part of that. All new ladies, and we went around the table. There was one more lady there that it was her first time, and she said, "No, I'll go last." And when she went, she spoke the same exact words of how I was feeling when I was going through burnout right before and when I fell into that illness. I felt exactly what she was saying. And she felt, oh, I'm the only one. Nobody else feels this way. And there's a lot of issues and health complications and et cetera she was feeling. And afterwards, I stayed with her and I poured into her and I told her, you're not alone. I felt the same exact things. that you were describing. She obviously felt shy to share. She did not want to share too much. But we did have that fellowship afterwards, and that empowered her. Oh, I'm not the only one. Other people feel the same way. So come out of your shell. It may be just a little here and there. Fill it out if it's safe to come out. If it's not, find another person. There are people who can relate. You just have to have enough courage to start sharing.
And I know we need to wrap up here pretty soon, but I do want to actually call attention to what's not on that list. So what is not on that list is spending endless hours watching TV, scrolling on social media, etc. And
No binging Netflix, y'all.
right, yeah, those are, I would say, not the most effective ways to counter boredom. Like you realize that these are connecting with people or engaging your brain or engaging your hands in a hobby. Most of us, especially if you work on the computer all day long, the one thing we don't need to help our boredom is more of that. So there you go. There's my opinion.
No endless binging of civilization or Ages of Empire.
Yes, we have a family member who is well acquainted with this version of combating boredom.
Oh, now she just threw me under the bus. Good thing he doesn't listen. Anyway,
I just got through Suits, and that was long. Like halfway through, I'm like, is this over yet? But I had to get to the end. It's like one of those things. You have to get through it.
Yeah, we all do it. Let's face it. We're all programmed to immediately tune in. But
squirrels come in. All right. So first of all, if you like our content, please subscribe, like, hit that bell button, and leave a comment so we can know what's going on with you and how we can help you with further content. And finally, so there are many solutions to the problem when you're looking at boredom. The first step is to recognize the problem and then work through the issues to solve it. Your idea is to access where the boredom is coming from. Is there a quick solution? Can it be implemented right away? And what does the long-term solution look like? Are there baby steps to help have little wins along the way? Do you need to seek a professional help to work through the issues that are causing what's going on? And as we self-discover the events that are leading to our cause of burnout, let's choose to take the necessary steps to break the stress cycle. Thank you for joining us. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.